Hello everyone, and welcome back to the world of dark romance. Tonight, we enter the haunting story of Silken Chains, a tale of obsession, music, and the fragile line between love and ruin. Behind the walls of the Vale mansion, one woman's melody will awaken something that should have stayed silent, and one man's devotion will become her most beautiful curse. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and let the music pull you under. This is Silken Chains. The taxi stopped before the gates, just as dusk swallowed the horizon. A pale fog curled around the iron bars, whispering across the gravel like the breath of something ancient. Eleanor Moreau sat motionless in the back seat, her fingers gripping the worn leather strap of her violin case. Her pulse matched the tick of the engine, uneven, waiting. The driver muttered something about the place being cursed, his accent thick and uneasy, but she barely heard him. Her attention was fixed on the mansion beyond the gates. It rose like a shadow against the dying light, all dark stone and tall windows that reflected nothing back. The kind of house that remembered every scream, every secret. When she stepped out, the air bit into her lungs, cold, sharp, real. She adjusted her coat, forcing herself forward. The gates groaned open before she even touched them. Someone had been waiting. A man stood in the doorway at the top of the marble steps, illuminated by the faint gold of the lanterns. His posture was effortless, but there was something predatory in the stillness, as though he'd been watching her approach from the moment she entered the estate. "Miss Moreau," he said, his voice smooth, rich, but threaded with something darker. "Welcome to Vale House." She froze halfway up the steps. "Mr. Vale?" "Cassian," he corrected, lips curving in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I don't like formalities in my home." His eyes, cold, silver gray, held hers with unrelenting focus. It wasn't the polite curiosity of a host. It was study, dissection. Inside, the mansion was a cathedral of silence. Every sound seemed to vanish beneath vaulted ceilings and heavy drapes. Portraits watched from the walls, faces half lost in dust and shadow. Cassian moved with quiet precision, his presence consuming the space. "You'll find your room upstairs, second door on the left. I expect you to start teaching at 9 tomorrow morning. My ward will require patience." Elena nodded, her voice catching. "Of course." He studied her again, lingering on her trembling hands. "You're afraid?" "No." "Good," he murmured, stepping closer, too close. "Fear ruins the sound, and I hired you for your music, not your nerves." His scent, sandalwood and something faintly metallic, brushed her skin. Then he stepped back, leaving a silence that throbbed in her chest. Later, in her room, Elena opened her violin case, running her fingers along the polished wood. The strings glimmered faintly under the candlelight, fragile, tense, waiting to be played. But downstairs, faintly, from somewhere behind the walls, she heard another sound. A violin. The same melody she used to play on stage before it all fell apart. Someone, or something, was playing her song. and the last note hung in the air too long, like a warning.
Elena didn't sleep that night. The melody echoed through her skull long after it faded from the air. Each note soft, deliberate, identical to her own composition. A piece she'd never published, a piece she had written in secret the night her career ended. She sat on the edge of her bed. The candle burned low, the flame trembling like it too was afraid. The mansion breathed around her. Soft creaks in the wood, distant murmurs behind the walls, the faint hum of a storm gathering beyond the hills. At dawn, she followed the sound. Barefoot, she crept down the corridor, her fingertips grazing the wallpaper, velvet and dust. The violin's echo had come from below, somewhere deep beneath the house. But when she reached the grand hall, she found Cassian already there, standing beside the piano, as though he'd been waiting all along. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked without turning. She hesitated. "Someone was playing." He finally looked at her, those cold silver eyes catching the morning light like fractured glass. "There's no one here but us, and my staff. And none of them touched the instruments without permission." "I heard it," she insisted. "My song." He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Your mind must be tired, Miss Moreau. Memories have a way of slipping into the present when we try to run from them." "I'm not running," she said quietly. Cassian tilted his head, studying her like she was a problem to be solved. "Aren't you? You left Paris overnight. No farewell performance, no explanation. You arrived here with only a violin and a past no one dares to mention." The air tightened. "You researched me. I don't invite strangers into my home." He took one more step forward until his voice was a low, dangerous whisper near her ear. "And I especially don't hire them to teach what they've already abandoned." Her pulse hammered. "You don't know me." "Not yet." His breath brushed her neck. "But I will." The words felt like a promise and a threat all at once. When he finally moved away, the world seemed too quiet again. She caught her reflection in the piano's polished surface. Pale skin, wild hair, eyes that betrayed too much. Cassian watched her from across the room, his posture calm, but the storm behind his gaze told a different story. "Breakfast is in the East Wing," he said finally. "You'll meet my ward there, and Miss Moreau." She looked back. "If you hear the violin again," he murmured, "don't follow it." He left her standing in the hall, heart pounding against her ribs. But as he disappeared into the shadows, she could have sworn she heard it again. Faint, distant, the ghost of her own melody drifting up through the floorboards. This time, it sounded like someone was calling her name through the strings. The East Wing smelled faintly of lilacs and something sterile, like a hospital that had tried to disguise itself with perfume. Elena followed the sound of soft footsteps until she reached a sunlit room lined with tall windows and pale curtains that barely stirred in the wind. A girl sat at the grand piano, pale, delicate, her dark hair falling in waves down her back. She couldn't have been more than 16. Her fingers rested on the keys, unmoving, as if afraid to wake them. "You must be Miss Moreau," the girl said without turning. Her voice was fragile, but her posture was perfect, controlled. "He told me you'd come." Elena smiled gently. "And you must be his ward." The girl nodded, eyes fixed on the ivory keys. "My name is Leora." Something in her tone unsettled Elena, polite yet mechanical, as though every word had been rehearsed. When she finally looked up, her irises were an unusual gray-blue, the exact shade of Cassian's. "Do you play?" Elena asked. Leora hesitated. I used to. But he prefers when I listen. Elena's chest tightened. Music isn't meant to be caged. It breathes through you. The girl tilted her head, studying her. That's what you think now? Wait until you've been here longer. Before Elena could answer, Cassian appeared in the doorway. He didn't knock. He didn't have to. His presence swallowed the room like a change in air pressure. Leora, he said softly, you may go. The girl rose instantly, bowing her head as she passed him, but when she reached the door she paused and whispered, almost too low for Elena to hear, "Don't follow the music at night." Then she was gone. Cassian stepped closer, his eyes narrowing slightly. She likes you. I don't think that's what that was. He smirked faintly. She doesn't speak to anyone. Consider that progress. Elena crossed her arms. What happened to her? A pause, the kind that says you shouldn't ask that. Curiosity is a dangerous trait here, Miss Moreau, he said finally. But I suppose that's what makes you interesting. He walked past her, trailing a gloved finger across the piano lid, and for a fleeting moment she saw something flicker in him. Grief, maybe, or guilt, but it vanished too quickly. Play for me, he ordered. She blinked. Now? Yes. I want to hear what silence did to you. Her throat tightened, but she obeyed. She drew the bow across the strings, the sound trembling at first, then filling the room like light-piercing fog. It wasn't perfect, it was raw. Pain given form. When the last note faded, Cassian's gaze was unreadable. Beautiful, he murmured, stepping closer. But beauty without surrender is meaningless. Her pulse stuttered. I didn't come here to surrender. He leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. Then, you came to the wrong house. The storm outside broke at that moment. Rain slashing against the windows, thunder growling in the distance. Cassian turned away, his reflection ghosting against the glass. Dinner at 8, he said. Wear something red. Elena stood there, violin in hand, breath shaking. Through the echo of thunder, she thought she heard it again, the faint, haunting sound of her secret melody drifting from beneath the floorboards. And this time, it wasn't alone. There was another voice beneath it, a whisper, calling her name. Rain battered the windows, turning the world outside into a blur of gray and lightning. By the time the clock struck 8, the mansion had transformed, shadows sharpened by candlelight, corridors humming with quiet expectancy. Elena hesitated before the mirror. The only red dress she owned had been left neatly folded on her bed that afternoon. She hadn't packed it. The fabric was silk, impossibly soft, clinging to her skin like it remembered the hands that had touched it before. Cassian had chosen it. He wanted her to wear his color. When she entered the dining hall, he was already there, sitting at the head of the long table beneath a crystal chandelier. A decanter of wine bled dark crimson across his glass. The moment he saw her, a faint smirk curved his lips, subtle and dangerous. Perfect, he said softly. Red suits you. It tells the truth. The truth, she echoed. He poured her a glass, the liquid glimmering like blood. Every color hides something. White pretends to be pure. Black pretends to be endless, but red admits what it wants. She sat across from him, her pulse betraying her calm expression. And what does red want, Mr. Vale? His gaze lingered on her mouth. Everything. Dinner passed in a strange rhythm, his questions deliberate, her answers cautious. He spoke of art, of control, of music that could manipulate the mind. Every word felt like a test, as if he were studying the places her voice trembled. "You play like someone who's afraid of silence," he said at last. "Maybe I am," she admitted. "Silence reminds me of what I lost." "Then don't lose it," he said simply. "It's not that easy." Cassian leaned back, swirling the wine in his glass. "Everything is easy when you stop pretending you're innocent." Her breath caught. "What makes you think I am?" His smile was a slow, knowing thing. "Because you still flinch when someone sees through you." For a moment, neither spoke. The storm outside howled, candles flickering against the marble. Then he stood, rounding the table with quiet, measured steps until he stood behind her chair. "Tell me, Elena," he whispered near her ear, "when you play, does it hurt?" She swallowed hard. "Sometimes." "Good." "It should." His gloved fingers brushed a stray lock of hair from her neck, lingering a second too long. The contact sent a shiver through her. Fear and fascination tangled too tightly to separate. Then he stepped back, his tone composed once more. "Good night, Miss Moreau. The walls remember everything here. Be careful what you give them." When he left, Elena sat in silence, her hands trembling around the glass. The candlelight flickered as if breathing with her, shadows twisting on the walls, and somewhere deep in the mansion, beneath the floor, the violin began again. But this time, she recognized the second instrument joining hers. Another violin, playing in perfect, haunting harmony. The mansion didn't sleep. It breathed. Eleanor woke to that sound again. Her song, played slowly this time, each note stretched into something mournful, like a voice calling from underwater. The storm had passed, but the rain still whispered against the windows, and the moon cast thin silver lines across her floorboards. She slipped from bed, barefoot, pulse quickening. The sound was clearer now. Closer. It was coming from beneath her room. The floor felt cold beneath her feet as she pressed her ear to the wood. The melody curved upward, the pitch trembling like a sob. Two violins, one hers, the other echoing, older, more desperate. She grabbed a candle, its flame fragile but steady, and crossed the hall. The staircase groaned beneath her weight, each step a warning. The mansion seemed to expand around her, the air thick with something electric. Not fear, not quite. More like anticipation. The music led her to a narrow door at the end of the west corridor, one she hadn't noticed before. It was locked, but the key hung conveniently beside it, glinting in the dark. Too easy, too deliberate. Still, she turned it. The door opened to a stone staircase spiraling downward into blackness. The scent of damp earth and varnish filled her lungs, and beneath it, the faint sweetness of rosin. She descended slowly, candlelight trembling against the walls until it reached a heavy wooden door below. The music was louder now. Her song, fractured, uneven, like someone was playing it through tears. She pushed the door open. The room was vast, lined with glass cases. Inside each stood a violin, dozens of them, old, new, broken, immaculate. Every instrument displayed like a relic, a grave marker of sound. And at the center, under a single low light, was him. Cassian. He stood before one of the cases, bow drawn across the strings of a dark red violin. His head tilted slightly, eyes closed, expression lost somewhere between agony and devotion. Elena froze. Cassian. He didn't stop. The melody rose higher, trembling at the edge of collapse. Only when the final note shattered into silence did he lower the bow and turn toward her. She'd never seen him look like that, stripped of all control, raw, human. But it vanished in an instant. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "I heard you," she whispered. "You were playing my song." A long pause. His jaw tightened. "Your song?" "Yes." Her voice shook. "How do you know it?" He walked toward her slowly, every step deliberate, the candlelight catching on his silver eyes. "Because," he murmured, "it was written long before you were born." Her pulse stumbled. "That's not possible. Nothing in this house is," he said, closing the distance. "Some music doesn't belong to its composer. It finds who it wants, and when it does, it doesn't let go." He brushed past her, extinguishing the candle with his gloved hand. The room plunged into darkness. In the black, his voice was the only thing she could hear. Low, near her ear, every word a soft command. "Go back to your room, Elena." "Why?" "Because if you stay," he murmured, "you'll learn what I've done to keep the music alive." Sleep never came. Even with the candle snuffed out, the echo of Cassian's voice lingered in her mind, low and commanding. "Go back to your room." But the more she tried to obey, the more the memory of those violins haunted her. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed and gray. Cassian was nowhere to be found. Leora sat at breakfast alone, stirring her tea until the sugar disappeared. "He doesn't like the West Wing disturbed," the girl said without looking up. "He says it remembers." "Remembers what?" Elena asked. Leora's spoon stilled. "You'll see. Everyone does." That was the only answer she gave. When Elena left the dining hall, curiosity burned through her caution. The door she'd found last night, its image wouldn't leave her mind. So when the servants disappeared into their routines and the halls fell quiet, she went back. The corridor seemed longer in daylight, the air heavier, like the house had woken and was watching her. The key was gone, but the door stood slightly open, as if inviting her. The staircase below felt colder now, the steps damp beneath her hands. She descended, candle in hand, and reached the gallery of violins once more. Dust motes floated like ash in the light slicing through a high window. This time, she noticed something new. At the far wall, half hidden by shadow, was another door, smaller, plain wood, no lock. Her pulse quickened. She pushed it open. Inside was a room no larger than her chamber upstairs. The air was thick with varnish and faint rot. On a single table lay pages of sheet music, brittle with age. She stepped closer, her throat tightening when she recognized the notes. Her melody, written in an older hand, centuries old. The title read, "Lament for the Vale," and beneath it, in ink that had bled to brown, "To the one who hears it, you belong to me." A floorboard creaked behind her. Elena spun around. Cassian stood in the doorway, shadow cutting across his face. No fury, just quiet disappointment, sharper than anger. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I had to know," she whispered. "What is this place?" His eyes lingered on the pages between her hands. "A promise," he said finally. "My father made it. I'm still paying the debt. A debt to whom?" He didn't answer. He crossed the room, taking the sheet gently from her fingers. "There are things in this house that feed on what we create. Music, emotion, pain. My father called it art. That's impossible." Cassian looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time she saw something human beneath the restraint. Fear. "It's already chosen you, Elena." A shiver crawled down her spine. "What has?" He stepped back toward the door. The melody. The candle flame trembled between them. I mean stop playing it, he said, voice breaking on the edge of command. Before it finishes playing you. The house listened. Elena felt it in the way the curtain stirred when she passed, in the way echoes clung to her steps long after she stopped walking. Every wall seemed to breathe in time with her heartbeat. She told herself not to touch the violin again. She even locked the case. But by dusk, the silence pressed too hard, and the memory of the melody thrummed in her chest like a pulse she couldn't ignore. When she finally drew the bow across the strings, the note rose smooth and mournful, and the air shifted. A faint vibration ran through the floor, as though something below had woken to the sound. Then came another tone, answering her, low, ancient, not from any instrument she could see. The two voices, hers and the unseen one, twisted together until the air shimmered. Candles guttered. A whisper formed between the notes. Don't stop. Elena froze. Who's there? Only silence. But when she looked up, Cassian stood in the doorway. His coat was damp from rain, his eyes caught between fury and fear. I told you not to play it, he said. It called to me. That's what it does. He stepped closer, each word tight, controlled. It feeds on the sound, on you. Once the lament begins, it doesn't end until someone pays the cost. She lowered the violin. You said it was your father's debt. Cassian's jaw clenched. He wrote the first notes. He thought he could trap grief inside music, turn sorrow into beauty. But the song doesn't stay contained. It binds itself to whoever understands it. He reached for the instrument, fingers brushing hers. The contact was light, yet the current that passed between them felt alive. Then why bring me here? She whispered. His voice softened. Because it was already searching for you, Elena. You were playing fragments of it long before you arrived. The house only finished what you began. Lightning flashed, flooding the room with white. For an instant she saw shapes on the wall, shadows shaped like dancers, like faces pressed in the plaster. When the light faded, the images were gone. Cassian took the violin from her hands and set it down with reverence, as though it might shatter the world if it fell. Tomorrow, he said quietly, we seal the gallery. No more music until I find a way to silence it. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. Whatever you hear tonight, whatever it whispers, don't answer it. After he left, the silence felt heavy, unnatural. Then, beneath her window, the same melody began again, played not by strings, but by wind moving through the eaves. And this time, the whisper was clearer. You belong to the Vale. Morning arrived too quietly. No storm, no rain. Just a thick stillness that made the air feel heavier than before. The house had gone silent, yet Elena could sense it listening. The sound wasn't gone. It had gone inside. She tried to distract herself with Leora's lesson, but the girl kept glancing at the walls as though someone else were listening in. Do you hear it too? Elena asked softly. Leora's fingers hovered over the keys. You made it angry. Who? The house. Elena's breath caught. Houses can't be angry. Leora looked at her then, with eyes too old for her age. This one can. Before Elena could reply, Cassian entered the room, his expression carved in calm precision. Leora, that's enough for today. The girl vanished without a word. Cassian didn't speak until the door shut. Then he turned toward the window, his back to her. You shouldn't indulge her stories. "She's frightened," Elena said. "And you—" She hesitated. "You're afraid, too." He laughed softly, but it sounded more like surrender than amusement. "Afraid? No, Miss Moreau. I've already seen what fear becomes in this house." He faced her then. The light cut across his face, tracing the faint scars along his jaw. Marks she hadn't noticed before. "What happened here, Cassian?" she asked quietly. He studied her for a long moment, then stepped closer until the space between them felt electric. "Do you really want to know?" "Yes." His voice dropped. "Every note of the lament binds a memory. My father filled this house with them. Moments stolen from people he brought here. Their pain became music, their memories. Walls." Elena's pulse stumbled. "That's impossible." He reached out, his hand hovering just short of touching her cheek. "Then tell me why they whisper your name when you walk by." The air thickened. The wall behind her gave a soft, shuddering sigh, as if something pressed against it from within. Elena turned, heart racing. Beneath the faded wallpaper, faint outlines shifted, forming something like faces, eyes, hands, gone in a blink. She stumbled back. "What are they?" Cassian's voice was low. "Echoes. The price of creation." Her hands trembled. "You said you wanted to silence it." He nodded. "But the only way to silence it is to destroy its heart. And that, Elena," he paused, gaze locked on her violin, "is now you." Lightning split the grey sky, illuminating the reflection of the room in the glass. For a fleeting instant, Elena saw herself not alone but surrounded. Dozens of blurred figures standing behind her, watching through the reflection. When she blinked, they were gone. Cassian whispered, almost to himself, "It's begun again." By evening, the storm returned. Not a gentle one, a violent, consuming tempest that made the chandeliers tremble and the ancient walls groan. Elena couldn't sleep. Cassian's words refused to fade. The only way to silence it is to destroy its heart. The air in her room pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat buried within stone. The whispers had grown clearer. Not screams this time, but murmured fragments of music, unfinished notes longing to resolve. Unable to resist, she followed the sound. Barefoot, candle in hand, she descended through corridors that seemed to breathe with her, guiding her deeper into the house's bowels. Each step brought a memory she didn't own. Flashes of a woman crying, a violin burning, Cassian kneeling before firelight, his face painted with grief. The door at the end of the hall opened on its own. Inside lay a vast chamber lit by the dim orange of dying embers. Instruments filled the space. Cellos, violins, harps, all charred or shattered, arranged in a circle around a single marble pedestal. Upon it, an ornate violin lay untouched. Its wood gleamed like dark honey, veins of gold curling across its body like veins of blood frozen mid-beat. Elena stepped closer. The air vibrated with quiet sorrow. Cassian's voice came from the shadows. "You found it." She turned. He stood there, coat undone, eyes hollow yet burning. "What is this place?" He approached slowly, candlelight catching on his wrist, faint scars circling it like shackles. "My father's sanctum. The place where every melody in this house was born, and where every soul was taken to make it sing." Her breath trembled. "Taken?" He nodded. He believed that to create eternal beauty, one must trap a moment of true despair. The final note of a dying heart. Elena's stomach turned. "And you? Did you help him?" Cassian's jaw clenched. I ended him. The storm outside cracked like a whip. I've tried to cleanse this place ever since, he continued, but it needs music to survive. The moment you played that first night, the walls awakened. You awakened it. Elena shook her head. So what now? You plan to keep me here to feed it? His expression flickered. Pain, restraint, longing. No, I plan to end it. To end us, if I must. He moved closer, the air thickening around them. There's one final composition hidden in this room. If we play it together, it will either silence the house forever or consume us both. Elena stared at him, at the quiet desperation in his eyes, and knew he wasn't lying. Outside, thunder roared. The violin on the pedestal began to hum softly, as if waiting. She whispered, "Then teach me." Cassian's lips curved, not in triumph, but in surrender. Be certain, Elena. Once we begin, the house will demand blood for every note. I'm not afraid, she said, though her pulse betrayed her. He studied her, then extended his hand. Then come. Let's wake the heart. The bow trembled between Elena's fingers. Cassian's hand covered hers, steadying the motion with silent control. The violin gleamed on the pedestal between them, its strings vibrating without touch, whispering for attention, for release. Cassian lit the final candle in the circle. The shadows on the walls deepened, alive and restless. Once we begin, he said quietly, there's no pause. The music must finish, or the house will take what it needs to complete it. Elena nodded, unable to look away from his eyes. A dark reflection of everything she feared and wanted. He lifted his own violin, older, worn, its surface cracked like something that had survived a fire. Follow my lead. When I change key, don't hesitate. It will try to pull you under. It, she whispered. The house. He began to play. The first note was low, mournful, and it moved through the chamber like breath through a crypt. Elena joined, her bow gliding across strings that hummed beneath her pulse. The harmony between them was unnatural, flawless, as if the instruments themselves had been waiting centuries to find each other again. The walls began to breathe. Shadows rippled upward, forming shapes that reached for the ceiling, curling and twisting like smoke seeking light. Faces emerged in the dark, mouths open in silent cries that vanished as the melody shifted. Cassian's eyes met hers. Don't stop. The floorboards pulsed underfoot, a steady rhythm matching her heartbeat. The music deepened, the notes weaving through the air like silk and steel. And then she felt it. The pull, a current of sorrow and longing that slid beneath her skin. Whispering memories that weren't hers, a girl in white falling, a man screaming her name, fire devouring every wall. Elena's bow faltered. Cassian caught her wrist mid-motion, guiding it back into rhythm. It feeds on hesitation, he warned. Play. She obeyed, tears burning her eyes as visions poured in. Each note unraveling pieces of a past that refused to die. Cassian's face flickered between present and memory, his father's shadow merging with his. The music climbed higher, desperate, violent. The air cracked with energy. Candles burst in sequence, one after another, until only darkness remained, and the two of them glowing faintly in the amber pulse of the violin. Then came the final chord. Cassian drew his bow across the strings with brutal precision, and the sound that followed wasn't music. It was a scream. The walls convulsed, The whispering stopped, the echoes fell silent. Elena's knees gave out. The violin dropped to the ground without a sound. When she looked up, Cassian was still standing, breath ragged, eyes unfocused, blood dripping from his fingertips. The storm outside had vanished. The silence that followed was complete. She whispered, "Did we stop it?" Cassian looked down at her, voice low, hollow. "No, Elena." We finished the first movement. For a moment, the silence felt like peace. Then it began to breathe. The floorboards exhaled beneath Elena's palms. And faint, mournful vibrations returned, not from the violin, but from the walls themselves. The mansion had learned their melody. Cassian stood unmoving, his expression unreadable, his shadow stretched unnaturally long across the broken circle of candles. "It's not over," he murmured. "It's never over." Elena rose unsteadily. "You said—" "I said it would silence the house if it allowed it," he interrupted. "But it never does. It always takes something first." Her heart tightened. What did it take this time? He looked at his hands, blood still marking the spaces between his fingers, and didn't answer. Lightning flashed across the window, illuminating the room with sharp, ghostly clarity. In that brief light, she saw figures standing behind Cassian, hundreds of them, pale and translucent, eyes fixed on him in silent devotion or blame. When darkness returned, they were gone. "Cassian," she whispered, "you're bleeding." He smiled faintly, a crack in his calm. "It's not mine." The words lodged in her chest. "Then whose?" The sound came then, a low hum deep beneath the floor. Not the mournful song of before, but something older, colder, and alive. Cassian's composure broke for the first time since she'd met him. He turned sharply toward the door. "Go to your room." "I'm not leaving you, Elena." His tone was a warning, dark and desperate. "You don't understand." "It knows you now. The music mocked you." Her pulse pounded in her ears. "Then teach me how to survive it." He stared at her, really stared, as if seeing her for the first time. "No one survives it. They become part of it." The air thickened, a pressure like unseen fingers closing around her throat. The candles reignited on their own, their flames blue and trembling. Cassian stepped close, his hand brushing her cheek, grounding, almost tender. "If it comes for you," he whispered, "remember the dissonance. The wrong note is what keeps you free." Then, before she could ask what he meant, he turned and pushed open a hidden door behind the pedestal, a door she hadn't seen before, and disappeared into the blackness beyond. The chamber began to change. The instruments around her started to hum, each string vibrating softly, forming an eerie, discordant harmony. The floorboards pulsed beneath her feet like veins, and from the darkness beyond the hidden door, a voice whispered her name. Not Cassian's, not human. "Elena." The violin on the pedestal lifted an inch into the air, bow moving on its own, playing a single, trembling note. One that didn't belong to any song she knew. The wrong note. And for the first time the house sounded afraid. The note lingered in the air like a crack in reality. A sound too imperfect to belong in the world, yet too precise to be accidental. Elena froze, her hand clutching the edge of the pedestal as the violin continued to play by itself. Each stroke of the bow scraped against her nerves, raw and uneven, until the sound abruptly stopped. The silence that followed was jagged, unnatural. "Cassian?" Her voice trembled. Only the echo of her own breath answered. The hidden door behind the pedestal yawned open, exhaling a faint metallic scent, copper, stone, and something ancient. The candle flames bent toward it, drawn by a draft that felt like a sigh. She stepped forward. The corridor beyond was narrow, lined with faded portraits, not of nobles or ancestors, but of the same man over and over again. Cassian's father, his expression different in each frame, serene, furious, grieving, hollow. At the corridor's end, the air pulsed faintly with rhythm, the echo of a heartbeat muffled by walls. The door there was half open, light spilling out like molten gold. She pushed it. The chamber inside looked nothing like the others. It was modern, bare concrete, glass and metal, as though the mansion had grown a heart of machinery beneath its bones. At the center stood Cassian, surrounded by dozens of flickering monitors that reflected fragments of his face. He turned as she entered. "You weren't supposed to follow." "I heard the note," she said. "You said the wrong note keeps me free." "What did you mean?" He studied her, the dim light carving sharp lines along his jaw. "My father believed perfection summoned the divine. But the truth is the opposite. Perfection calls death. Only imperfection resists it." "The dissonance," she whispered. He nodded. "The house consumes every perfect harmony we give it. It feeds on beauty because beauty is still. Flawed music is alive, unpredictable. That's why it can't control you." Something flickered behind him. A shadow shaped like a man. It moved when he didn't. "Cassian." He didn't turn. "I know." The air crackled. The shadow stepped closer to him, overlapping his form like a reflection trying to reclaim what it lost. Cassian's voice lowered. "It's my father. The house is his body now. Every wall, every echo." The shadow's hand rose, brushing the back of Cassian's neck, and for an instant Elena saw terror in his eyes. "Run," he whispered. But she didn't move. "Not without you." The room trembled, lights flickered, the monitors shattered one by one until the chamber drowned in darkness. Elena reached for Cassian, but her hand met cold air. He was gone. In the silence that followed, the violin's voice returned, faint, fragile, but wrong in all the right ways. And as she listened, she realized it was echoing not from the chamber, but from inside her chest. The sound grew inside her like a pulse made of melody. Soft at first, then steady, rhythmic, relentless. It wasn't a tune she could place, yet it carried fragments of her own music, like the mansion had grafted part of her soul into its veins. Elena pressed her palm against her chest. The heartbeat beneath her skin no longer belonged entirely to her. The chamber lay in ruin. Cassian gone, the monitors still crackling faintly with static. She turned in circles, whispering his name, but only echoes answered, each one repeating her voice with a half-second delay, as though mocking her hope. "Cassian." "Cassian." She forced herself to breathe. "He's still here. Somewhere." Her fingers brushed the violin lying on the floor. It was warm. When she lifted it, the faint vibration in its body synced perfectly with her pulse. Then, a whisper. Not from the room, but from inside her mind. "You're not supposed to be alive, little note." Elena froze. "Who said that?" The voice laughed, distant and dry as dust. "You played too well. The house chose you. My son brought you here for me." Her breath caught. "You're him, Cassian's father. He thinks he killed me." The whisper grew closer, colder. "But I am the echo of every soul he took, every melody ever caged. And now?" The violin in her hands flared with sound, strings vibrating violently. "I want my heart back." Elena stumbled backward, clutching the instrument to her chest. The walls around her began to hum, faint outlines of faces emerging through the concrete. Each one mouthed the same word. "Elena." She shook her head. "No, you can't have me." The hum turned sharp, discordant. Then, a sudden grip on her wrist. Real, human. Cassian stood behind her, his face pale, eyes dark and unsteady. "Don't answer him," he said, voice hoarse. "He can hear through you now." She turned toward him, shaking. "He's inside me, Cassian." "I hear him." He stepped closer, his hand still on her wrist, grounding her against the trembling air. "That's because he marked you through the music. When we played, the house used the connection between us to pass through." Elena's eyes filled. "So what do we do?" Cassian's jaw tightened. "We find the origin. The first melody he ever made. The one that started the curse, and where is it?" He looked past her, toward the far end of the hall. "Below." The air thickened, heavy with the scent of rain and dust. Cassian's hand slid down to entwine with hers, not tenderly but desperately, like a man gripping the last thread keeping him human. "Stay close," he whispered. "No matter what it shows you. No matter what it says." And as they stepped into the dark passage that led beneath the house, the music inside her chest changed. No longer fear, but something that almost sounded like longing. The passage spiraled downward beneath the mansion, carved from cold stone that glistened with moisture. The air grew heavier with every step. Each breath tasted of rust and forgotten prayers. Their candlelight flickered weakly, swallowed by the black. Cassian moved ahead, one hand brushing the wall as if it remembered his touch. "He built this tunnel long before I was born," he said. "He said it was where perfection was born." Elena's footsteps echoed beside his. "You mean where he created the first melody?" He nodded. He called it The Origin, a song that could bind life and death. The deeper they went, the louder the pulse in Elena's chest became. It matched the rhythm of something beneath them, a slow, steady throb that wasn't mechanical or human, a heartbeat made of sound. At the tunnel's end, a door waited, wrought iron and engraved with musical notes that shifted subtly when the candlelight touched them, like the score itself was alive. Cassian hesitated before the handle. "Once we open this, we can't turn back." Elena placed her hand beside his. "Then, open it." The hinges screamed as the door gave way. A vast chamber unfolded before them, circular and impossibly tall, the ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a stone platform surrounded by black water. Upon it rested a single violin, ancient, cracked, its strings made of what looked like strands of silver hair. Elena felt it before she heard it, the vibration under her skin. The same tone that had haunted her since she arrived. Cassian's voice was barely a whisper. "My mother's hair." She turned to him. "Your mother?" "She was the first melody," he said hollowly. He took her music, her life, said it was the only way to perfect his art. The water around them rippled, reflecting shapes that weren't there, figures trapped beneath the surface, reaching upward. Cassian knelt beside the edge, staring at his reflection. Every person he took, he buried here, in sound. The origin is their prison. Elena stepped closer to the platform. The violin called to her, soft and pleading, like a child's cry in another room. When she touched its strings, a shock of warmth traveled up her arm, flooding her body with memories not her own. A woman's laughter, a burning studio, a young boy crying into the dark. Cassian's voice broke through the haze. "What do you see?" "Her," Elena whispered. "Your mother. She's still in there." The chamber trembled. The water churned, voices rising in a mournful chorus. Then, through the noise, a single voice cut clear. "Play it." Cassian reached for her hand. "Don't." Elena met his eyes. "It's the only way to set her free." He shook his head slowly. "You don't understand. Once the origin is played, the house chooses its new heart." Her chest throbbed painfully. The wrong note, the dissonance, echoed faintly inside her again. She looked at Cassian, then at the violin. Maybe it already has. The chamber pulsed like a living heart. The water roared beneath the platform, glowing faintly, as if lit from below by trapped souls. Elena stood before the ancient violin, the air trembling around her. The faint voice, Cassian's mother, whispered again, "Play it, child. End it." Cassian's hand tightened around her wrist. His touch shook. "If you do this, it will take you." "It always does." She turned toward him. Candlelight caught in his eyes, making them seem too human, too fragile. "If I don't, it will take you instead." "Elena." "I can hear her," she interrupted. "She's still in pain." "Your father built this to hold her music. If it ends with me, so be it." Cassian's breath trembled. "Don't make me lose another song." The words broke something inside her. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. For a fleeting heartbeat, the world fell still. Only their breath, their pulse, and the faint hum of the violin between them. "I am not your song," she whispered. "I'm the silence that ends it." Then she pulled away. Cassian reached for her, but she was already stepping onto the platform. The stone beneath her feet throbbed with heat. The strings of the violin shimmered like molten silver. When she lifted the bow, the chamber went completely dark. The first note rose softly, trembling and human. Not perfect, not divine, but alive. The second followed, clashing against it, a dissonant harmony that made the entire room shudder. Cassian fell to his knees at the edge of the water. "Elena, stop!" But she didn't. The melody swelled. Grief, love, rage, surrender. The walls cracked. The water ignited into light. The trapped souls began to rise, their outlines dissolving into sound. Cassian's father's voice screamed from the depths. "You can't break what's divine." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Then I'll make it human." The final note tore through the air, raw and beautiful. The chamber exploded with silence. When the dust settled, the platform was empty. The violin had splintered into ash. Cassian stumbled forward, calling her name into the hollow quiet. "Elena?" No answer. He collapsed to his knees. The house above them groaned, then fell utterly still for the first time in decades. And then, faintly, a sound. A single, wrong note, echoing through the dark. Cassian lifted his head. The violin he'd carried since childhood lay beside him, untouched, yet one string vibrated on its own. He pressed his palm to his chest. Beneath his skin, faint and steady, a second heartbeat answered. "Elena," he whispered. The mansion's silence shifted, not haunted anymore, but waiting. And somewhere within its walls, the echo of her laughter joined the wind, soft and eternal, a melody made of imperfection, defying every rule of beauty. The house slept at last. The music lived on.
Winter came quietly to the Vale estate. Snow covered the broken stones, burying the mansion's scars beneath a clean white silence. The air no longer carried whispers. The walls no longer sang. Cassian returned for the first time since the night everything ended. He walked through the hollow corridors, each footstep echoing into emptiness. Dust floated like ghosts in the pale morning light. He stopped in the music room, the one where she had first played. The piano stood untouched, the strings long since stilled. On its surface lay her bow, cracked but whole enough to remember her hands. Cassian ran a thumb over the worn wood. "You would have hated the quiet," he murmured. Outside, wind swept through the broken window panes, and for a moment it sounded almost like a chord. Faint, fragile, familiar. The wrong note. He smiled bitterly. "Still haunting me, little note." The whisper that followed was softer than breath. Not haunting. Cassian froze, listening. The air shimmered, and a single snowflake drifted down to the piano, dissolving as it touched the wood. Then, without wind or movement, one of the strings began to hum, the exact dissonant tone she'd once played to break the curse. He closed his eyes. "You're still here." A warmth pressed gently against his chest, the echo that had never truly left him, steady as a second heartbeat. Cassian sat at the piano, his fingers resting on the keys. "Then let's play." The first note was imperfect, the second, even worse. But the third filled the mansion with light. Outside, the snow fell harder, muffling the world in peace. And somewhere in the music, hidden between the wrong notes, Elena's voice whispered one last time. "Beautiful isn't perfect, Cassian."
And that was Silken Chains, a story of love that bound itself in silence, and a song that refused to die. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for stepping once more into the darker side of love. If you want more stories like this one, subscribe, stay close, and never stop listening to the whispers between the notes. Until next time, this is Dark Romance Stories, where love is never just love. It's an obsession.